modern discourse has been irrevocably shaped and altered by the nature of anonymity. This anonymity, abated by the prevalence and reliance of online boards, has become the foundation for our modern conception of communication. It is through observation that I believe we may define this modern form of communication along three diagonals of bait, banter, and aura. I will similarly argue that these three diagonals constitute all online discourse, and even if one is unaware or intends to avoid this diagonal, will still fall under one of these three axes in all online discourse. For the purposes of this analysis, bait, banter, and aura are considered devices of modern communication that seek to stoke, resolve, or flare a social conflict. Whilst they may fill any of the roles as fit by the participants, their applications and common usage differ. In tradition, bait can be considered one's ability or usage to stoke discussion or social conflict. Bait seeks to inflame other participants besides the user by touching on sensitive, controversial, or otherwise taboo subject matter with the express purpose of enraging. Whilst bait is often meant to be used as a form of disattachment and therefore may be used as resolution for the user, oftentimes bait will consume the one who wields it just as often as it does consume others. Banter in tradition is considered one's ability to flare an already active conflict. Whilst bait and aura can do so as well, banter's express purpose is to use intentionally outlandish, taboo, or otherwise nonsensical statements to create a comedic result, often at the expense of one or more parties. Banter, in reflection of bait, can be used to resolve a social conflict, fulfilling a role opposite of its traditional purpose. Unlike bait, though, banter is considerably less volatile in nature and is able to be wielded to both effects without mistake. Aura in tradition is resolution. Aura, unlike bait or banter, describes less action but instead a quality and can be used outside of discourse or even unintentionally within. Aura simply denotes one's presence, either socially or physically, allowing for the resolution of conflict via the subtle threat of humiliation or domination from the participant with aura. Aura is the most volatile of the three axes, though, as aura is neither immutable nor stagnant, dependent entirely on one scenario. These three axes are what I have defined as the Holy Trinity of online discourse, or the Holy Trinity for simplicity. Whilst these axes have been defined simply, this is to simply give a foundation of the traditional workings of each axis, not to comprehend them completely. In order to do so, it is important we view them through the social context with which they interact. A model is necessary for this understanding, but its parameters must be first defined before we begin simulation with our participants. The model we are working with seeks to encapsulate the common scenario of online discussion. For the purpose of this model, the inherent topic does not matter. Platform does, however, as any given platform may alter the aura of a participant, and/or what banter or bait is most effective. This is similarly not to disregard the potential aura loss or gain dependent on a participant's endeavors on other platforms. For the sake of this model, we will consider this potential loss or gain neutral, as in each participant only has one account and these are their first post, and we will use a neutral platform. This can be conceptualized as any independent forum for niche or specific topics of interest, which, whilst having individual differences, do not have site or internet-wide cultures notions that will dramatically influence the Holy Trinity. Secondly, let us define the goals of this model. All online discourse has one goal, that is to defeat another participants. This is reflective of the domination and humiliation inherent in each axis of the Holy Trinity, though the discussion of the practical implications on future discourse will be discussed later. Defeat can be defined in multiple ways in discourse, but will be simplified into two dominant goals. One of the opponents is forced to stop posting. This is either because they have been sufficiently dominated, humiliated, or banned from a higher power. 2. One of the opponents has garnered a larger support base for their claims actions than that of another opponents, and so have sufficiently proven themselves dominant within the conflict. With both of these parameters in mind, we may now begin the model. Observing the model in action, we will note several immediate reactions from the participants. First, we will see the spark of conflict is started most commonly by the beta, who we shall refer to from now as BA. Within this model we also observe the common methodology of BA, that is to bait using inherently controversial and importantly subjective subject matter. Within this model it is revealed to us further the nature of bait. Bait is reliant not simply on controversiality but on subjectivity. It may be the assumption that any adequately taboo subject, race, religion or sex, is grounds for bait, yet that is to miss the inherent need for an underlying belief and logic to the schema of a bait. Bait that cannot be argued in earnest, not necessarily by the beta themselves, may only constitute aura farming, a topic that will be discussed later in the model. For the model, the exact nature of BA's statement is irrelevant, but the components listed before are to be kept in mind. From this point the model may branch in two general paths. Either A, aura, who we will refer to as AU, will interact with the BA, in which a show of domination will occur. If AU is to dominate, that is to garner larger support or is to sufficiently humiliate BA, they defeat BA in the interaction, ending the model and garnering further aura. If they are to lose this show of domination, then the interaction can be considered lost barring the support of another aura, hypothetical AU2, or the obfuscation of another bait or banter, hypothetical BA2 and B2. This illustrates the simplest form of the Holy Trinity model, and represents the baseline of all actions that will be considered from here on. Let us examine again a more complex model. In this, BA has sparked a conflict which no AU has come across to resolve. Instead, this model illustrates the interaction between BA and BT. BT interacts with the initial conflict presented by BA, revealing several important qualities of BT and Banter. The important notes from this interaction are that unlike BA's goal, which is to start conflict, or AU's, which is to resolve, BT's is to prolong. For this purpose, BT may be easily confused as either BA or an AU with low aura, but there are important differences to note. The first and most obvious sign of Banter and BT is lack of consistency. Whilst BA and AU are bound by logical schema that are required for their respective social insights to be coherent, that is, BA must have a logical stance that can be argued but not defeated, and must stay to it, and AU must resolve conflict either by having aura or not. BT requires no logical follow-through within their conflict. BT may both bait, whilst without warning switching away from their initial topic, contradicting their own arguments, or any combination thereof. Similarly, they may at one point rely on aura, either low aura to prolong an argument by creating a sort of honeypot, what we shall call an aura pot, for aura farmers, or high aura in order to attract BAs who wish to dominate the interaction, or other unsuspecting BTs. This makes Banter and BTs one of the hardest to identify, and as well a wild card within any model that wishes to accurately represent the Holy Trinity. The important distinction that allows for one to understand Banter, though, is the lack of resolution. The commonality between BA and AU is hope for quick resolution on their end. Whilst a BA may want for continued argument, they themselves will hope to flee from the argument, only sparking conflict, or will seek to siphon aura from a conflict from other participants. AUs will similarly seek to resolve conflicts, as their ability relies completely on a limited and immutable resource. They have little room to garner or lose AU from further conflict. From this understanding, BTs can be identified not by characteristics unique to them, but by lack of characteristics. Identifying these characteristics, BT responds to BA with a purposefully inflammatory and nonsensical reply. This may be an illogical agreement, a misinterpretation of the original statement, a combination thereof, or a response not listed. From this point the model again branches. A. BA is sufficiently confused or dominated by this statement. This may be for a variety of reasons. They are an aura farmer and so, recognizing the BT's method of approach, do not respond. They may believe the BT to be AU and feel adequately outclassed, or may assume the BT is a BA seeking to aura farm. Either method results in the BA ceasing their correspondence with BT, and depending on the scenario, the bait entirely. B. BA is unable to identify BT, or if they are an aura farmer, has fallen for BT's aura pot. Regardless of method, BA recognizes BT as a potential partner in this conflict and responds. The model from here once again branches. Bone, BA and BT respond for some indeterminate amount of messages, ceasing once BA has either recognized BT for what they are, or has lost a sufficient amount of aura. BT double, a third party, either another BA or an AU, enters the correspondence. This correspondence has the possibility of shutting down either the BT or BA respectively. The BT may become enthralled by the bait of the hypothetical second BA, what we shall refer to as Beatwo, in which they will likely cease their BT activities and fall either into AU, conflict resolution, or BA, saving face by creating further conflict before retreating. If an AU is to enter, whilst it may dominate the BT, it is far more likely to clash with the BA, redirecting attention away from the BT, in which the model will then conclude as if a BA had clashed with an AU. For the completion of this model, I will also define an aura farmer. Aura farmers refers to a specific subgroup of BA or AUs who seek specifically to start or resolve conflict in the intentional hopes of garnering aura. Aura farmers display several unique behaviors from the rest of their caste, but can be identified most easily by their harsh embodiment of either AU or BA characteristics. Whilst a BT will switch between AU and BA as is convenient to engender conflict, an aura farmer will switch between AU and BA only so far as to resolve conflict. One may argue that this introduces a fourth element to the Holy Trinity, but it is important to note that an aura farmer will always begin as either an AU or BA, and will return to this state after conflict has been resolved. In this sense, aura farming can be considered a defense mechanism used by BAs or AUs who are particularly insecure or feeble. The conclusion of the model also presents us with the reality of the shifting nature of BAs, AUs, and BTs, that is to say, neither is inherently immutable as a characteristic. Whilst a participant may have an immediate affinity for one, depending on the outcomes of individual interactions, they have the ability to become either or. For instance, it is common for BAs that have high rates of success to transition to AUs, whilst taking the appearance of BAs, due to their aura, that is to say the knowledge of other participants that they are BAs, to in practice act as AUs. Inversely, BAs with particularly low success rates may become BTs, as they find the illogical nature of banter freeing. This is to note that this is a rarity compared to BAs becoming AUs, as many BAs who attempt to become BTs only do so in half measure, ending up as aura farmers with a BA nature. The most important component of this model is the understanding that discourse will never break from these three axes. Any participant will at any given time will either be a BA, AU, or BT, and whilst they may become mutations of each, will on a long enough time scale, all eventually reflect one of those three identities. The question remains now, what does my research reveal about the nature of contemporary society and communication? In that respect, I believe the Holy Trinity reveals not the breakdown of civility, but a return to our more primal instincts. Human nature tends towards a sort of social homeostasis we crave as animals of habit of a consistent and steady growth that neither expands beyond what we can whelm, nor is stagnant. To this extent, it is the natural inclination of any social group to create both a hierarchy and bound worldview. Hierarchical coordinations of groups are necessary in the maintenance of society. We crave not simply stagnation, but growth. It is our natural avarice that drives us both in society and material, and that reflects within the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity is built upon a point system, treating one's social presence as a material to be accrued. This, coupled with a system of validation and recognition among peers, naturally inclines online interaction towards hierarchical structures between individuals. Bound worldview ascribes the closeness of thought amongst individuals in a group. Naturally, a group will become to resemble its members, as the individuals within create an echo chamber in where their own views are echoed amongst themselves. The Holy Trinity promotes this binding through its clear hierarchical system of social validation and recognition. It becomes the standard to praise and follow certain individuals, high aura AUs, whilst agreeing and disagreeing with others, particularly successful BAs. These two inclinations both maintain a societal homeostasis. As a clear hierarchy is created, individuals are routinely elevated. Those who follow and agree with the high AUs are validated among their peers. Those who become BAs are reviled by the community yet gain recognition and gathering amongst other BAs. BTs represent an important role in this ecosystem. Banter can be equated to the producer of aura and bait, supplying topics and discussion from which BAs and AUs may reap. Whilst this may seem initially to place them outside of the hierarchical nature of the Holy Trinity, it is important to note that BT users still fall within a hierarchy by their removal from it. By neither seeking to accrue aura nor baiting, BTs find themselves within a subgroup of the society consisting of themselves. This subgroup forms a hierarchy not amongst themselves, but in relation to their removal from the traditional hierarchy of aura and bait. This characteristic removal allows BT users to consider themselves above the social hierarchy, which in turn fulfills the same social need as BA users. This creates a social system pragmatic in fulfilling all members' needs, whilst also providing itself with a narrative satisfaction between villains, BA users, and heroes, AU users. This narrative-like structure, strong social bonding and validation, and clear social hierarchies, fulfills both the primal needs of a group, that is, hierarchy and validation, but as well secondary ideological needs, that is, narrative satisfaction amongst social gatherings, and validation of world views and experiences. I believe this is a uniquely contemporary form of gathering, only achieved by the pseudo-anonymous nature of online forums. In the context of our evolving world, the Holy Trinity and contemporary discourse represents a breakdown not of social gatherings which I believe it actually strengthens in a uniquely human way but a lack of. It is necessary for our maturation that our social circles change, break, or otherwise alter. This may be done in reality as the consequences of material means conflict with the social, friends move, physical differences, death, yet with the power of the Holy Trinity, pseudo-anonymity, and the naturally interconnected nature of online forums, typically incompatible social groups can be allowed to continue, growing or morphing until they become almost incestuous-like in their ideas, conversation, and ideology. It is my fear that in the worst case this fulfillment becomes a sort of drug in our social needs. That we seek relationships built exclusively from those who share superficially similar opinions and ideologies to us, denaturing the need for difference between individuals in lieu of a circling narrative between users that neither breaks nor grows. It is my deepest fear that these online forums' growth may collapse in on itself, leaving dozens of people inept in an understanding of the social contexts and disappointments that are common to our material life. Alternatively, it is my hope that these forums become a bastion for validation, that they provide hubs for people to strengthen their ideas, sharpening both their minds and ideologies not in the inherently combative and often awkward society we live in, but in a sort of playground for ideas. In total, the Holy Trinity must be understood neither as a condomination nor validation for online discourse, but as a definition to the patterns of behavior observed in our primary means of social fulfillment. These underlying behaviors are important to understand specifically because of the danger they pose if left unchecked, and even more so, the potential they hold if wielded well.